Welcome to another episode Spotlight Murder, and let's deep dive into the stories that shaped music history. I'm your host, Kieran Caldwell, and today we're exploring the extraordinary and haunting life of Lisa Left Eye Lopes, a story that weaves together triumph, rebellion, spirituality, and one of the most mysterious deaths in music history. This isn't just about the rise and fall of a superstar. This is about a woman who dared to speak truth to power, who felt the presence of unseen forces, and whose final days were filled with eerie premonitions that continue to chill those who knew her story. So settle in, because we're about to uncover the layers of Lisa Lopes' life. From her meteoric rise with TLC to her spiritual awakening in Honduras, and ultimately to that fateful day in April 2002 when everything changed forever. Let me take you back to May 27th, 1971, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. A baby girl was born who would grow up to become one of the most distinctive voices in hip-hop history. Lisa Nicole Lopes didn't just stumble into fame. She was forged by it, shaped by adversity, and driven by an unquenchable creative fire that would both make her legendary and, some believe, ultimately seal her fate. Picture this: a young Lisa growing up in a household ruled by an authoritative father, where discipline often crossed the line into volatility. But here's what's remarkable. Instead of breaking her spirit, these early challenges created something extraordinary. They fostered a deep resilience and emotional richness that would later become the beating heart of her music and public persona. Even as a child, Lisa was different. While other kids were playing outside, she was teaching herself piano, instinctively understanding that music wasn't just entertainment. It was expression, it was escape, it was power. She formed a group with her siblings called the Lopes Kids, performing at local church events. This wasn't just cute family entertainment. This was Lisa's first taste of what music could be, a medium for articulation and a source of solace. After graduating from the Philadelphia High School for Girls, Lisa made a decision that would change everything. At just 19 years old, she auditioned for a burgeoning R&B/hip-hop girl group in Atlanta. Think about that courage, leaving everything familiar behind to chase a dream in an industry that chewed up young artists and spit them out. She was chosen alongside Tion T-Boz Watkins and initially Crystal Jones to form what would become TLC. But here's where things get interesting. During contract negotiations, Crystal suddenly exited. Enter Rozonda Thomas, who took the moniker Chili to preserve the group's acronym. Meanwhile, Lisa embraced the nickname Left Eye after someone complimented her particularly striking left eye. It's almost poetic, isn't it? She became known for the eye that saw things others couldn't or wouldn't. With their lineup finalized, TLC emerged as something the music world had never seen before. They weren't just another girl group. They were pioneers, blending R&B, hip-hop, and pop with thoughtful social commentary that catapulted them to stardom in the early 1990s. Lisa didn't just contribute rap verses. She injected a singular vitality into TLC that was unmatched. Her avant-garde style, fierce persona, and unvarnished candor made her an emblem of daring self-assertion in the 1990s musical landscape. But success in the music industry, as Lisa would soon learn, came with strings attached, strings that would eventually become chains. Now, here's where Lisa's story takes a dramatic turn that would define public perception of her for years to come. In 1994, she became entangled in what would become one of the most notorious incidents of her personal life, involving Andre Rison, her boyfriend and NFL player. Their relationship was passionate, turbulent, and ultimately explosive, literally. Following an emotionally charged argument, fueled by alcohol and frustration, Lisa ignited Rison's sneakers in a bathtub. What she maintained was supposed to be a small act of defiance, spiraled out of control, leading to Rison's $1.3 million mansion being consumed by flames. The media had a field day. Here was Lisa Left Eye Lopes, the fierce rapper from TLC, being charged with arson. She eventually pleaded guilty and received 5 years probation plus a $10,000 fine. But here's what's remarkable about Lisa. She never tried to hide from it. In interviews, she discussed the incident openly, viewing it not as a mere mistake, but as an introspective milestone that taught her about the destructive power of unchecked emotion. But while the public was fixated on the drama of her personal life, something far more sinister was happening behind the scenes. Despite TLC's monumental success, we're talking about one of the best-selling girl groups of all time. The members were facing financial ruin. In 1995, at the height of their fame, TLC declared bankruptcy. Let that sink in. Here was a group that had sold millions of records, had hit after hit, were household names around the world, and they were broke. This wasn't because they were spending frivolously. This was the result of something much darker: exploitative contracts and management manipulation that would make your blood boil. Their former manager, Pebbles, had crafted contracts that were essentially legalized theft. She hid crucial details, emotionally manipulated the group, and maintained an iron grip on their financial decisions. Years later, on The Breakfast Club in 2013, T-Boz and Chili were brutally honest about this period. T-Boz aligned with DJ Envy's description of Pebbles as the devil, recounting how their manager used emotional manipulation to prevent them from questioning her authority. This period taught Lisa a harsh lesson about the music industry. Success didn't guarantee freedom, and fame could be its own prison. But Lisa was a fighter. TLC didn't just survive this financial devastation, they came back stronger. By the late 1990s, TLC had staged what can only be described as one of the most formidable comebacks in music history. Their 1999 album, Fan Mail, wasn't just commercially successful. It was a critical triumph that proved they were more than survivors. They were artists who had evolved through their struggles. The 2000 Grammy Awards became their night of vindication. 4 wins, including Best R&B Album for Fan Mail, Best R&B Song for No Scrubs, and Best R&B Performance by a Duo or Group for both No Scrubs and Unpretty. These weren't just songs. They were cultural moments that confronted societal norms, addressed pertinent social issues, and resonated with a global audience. But success, particularly hard-won success, can be exhausting. The constant pressure, the financial betrayals they'd endured, the public scrutiny of Lisa's personal life, it all took its toll. Following their Grammy triumph, TLC made the decision to take a hiatus. For Lisa, this break became something much more profound than a simple rest from touring and recording. She began to develop a deep connection with Honduras, particularly after Hurricane Mitch devastated the country in 1998. Here's where we see another side of Lisa, not the fiery performer or the headline-grabbing celebrity, but a humanitarian deeply moved by human suffering. She dedicated herself to literacy and educational initiatives in Honduras, finding in this work a purpose that transcended entertainment. Her stays there offered her something she couldn't find in the glittering world of American celebrity: tranquility. Away from the pressures of the music industry and her complicated history, Lisa began to delve into spirituality and explore natural healing practices. She started documenting this journey through personal journals and film, beginning what would become a quest for deeper meaning. But even as Lisa found peace in Honduras, tensions within TLC were simmering. The group dynamics that had been tested by financial stress and personal struggles were showing cracks that couldn't be ignored forever. This period of reflection and spiritual exploration would prove crucial to understanding what happened next, because Lisa wasn't just finding herself. She was preparing for a rebellion that would put her in direct conflict with some of the most powerful people in the music industry. In 2002, Lisa Left Eye Lopes made a decision that sent shockwaves through the music industry, a move so bold and defiant that many believe it sealed her fate. She chose to part ways with TLC and sign with Death Row Records, the label infamous for its connection to some of hip-hop's most controversial figures, including Suge Knight. This wasn't just a career change. This was a declaration of war against the system that had controlled and exploited her for over a decade. Lisa had reached her breaking point with the financial difficulties, burdensome contracts, and emotional manipulation that had defined her career. She was done being a puppet in someone else's show. Her decision to work with Suge Knight put her in direct conflict with major industry players like Clive Davis and Sean Diddy Combs, figures with substantial sway over artists' careers and the business landscape. These weren't people you crossed lightly in the music world. They had the power to make or break careers, to ensure projects never saw the light of day, to make artists disappear from the industry entirely. Lisa's upcoming second solo album, N.I.N.A. Dash, which stood for New Identity Not Applicable Dash, was designed to symbolize her fresh beginning. The title itself was a middle finger to the industry that had tried to define her, control her, brand her. Despite Death Row's troubling reputation, for Lisa it represented liberation and nonconformity, principles she increasingly embraced in her final years. But this partnership made her dangerous. Death Row was already seen as a competitor to the established record labels, and now they had Lisa Lopes, not just a talented artist, but someone with inside knowledge of how the industry really worked, someone who wasn't afraid to speak truth to power. In the documentary Hopelessly in Love, Suge Knight shared personal insights about Lisa that revealed just how serious she was about this new direction. He described her as possessing a formidable presence that evoked either admiration or fear in people. He recounted how Lisa arrived at his high-rise apartment with her belongings, ready to fully commit to his vision of creative independence. This wasn't a publicity stunt or a negotiating tactic. Lisa was burning bridges, and she knew it. What made Lisa truly dangerous to the music industry establishment wasn't just her talent or her fame. It was her willingness to expose the dark underbelly of the business. She courageously addressed the exploitation she had witnessed and experienced, shedding light on how executives manipulated contracts, withheld earnings, and intentionally created rifts among artists to maintain control. Lisa took direct aim at iconic figures like Clive Davis and Diddy, both renowned for their strategic manipulation in building musical empires. She wasn't just complaining about her own treatment. She was threatening to pull back the curtain on systematic abuse that affected countless artists. Think about the power dynamics at play here. The music industry has always operated on control, controlling artists' creative output, their financial arrangements, their public image, even their personal relationships. Artists who played along were rewarded. Those who spoke out were punished. But Lisa had reached a point where she didn't care about the consequences anymore. Some fans and industry observers believed that by aligning with Death Row and preparing to broadcast her message from this more audacious platform, Lisa was venturing into genuinely perilous territory. Her outspoken stance had the potential to ignite a movement of resistance among other artists trapped in unfair contracts. Imagine if Lisa's rebellion had succeeded. Imagine if N.I.N.A. had been released and had inspired other major artists to break free from exploitative deals. The financial implications for the industry's power brokers would have been staggering. But here's what's chilling about this story. Lisa seemed to understand the danger she was in. Her escalating defiance didn't go unnoticed, and she knew it. The music industry has long been rumored to retaliate against non-conforming artists through blackballing, shelving projects, or even more severe measures. Lisa's entire career had been encircled by control, manipulation, and enforced silence. From the exploitative TLC contracts to the financial manipulations of Pebbles, from the media scrutiny of her personal life to the pressure to conform to industry expectations. By 2002, her resolve was set to dismantle these constraints completely, both metaphorically and literally. From the infamous fire at Andre Rison's mansion to her blunt interviews about industry corruption, Lisa had always been a beacon of resistance, but her decision to join Death Row Records and prepare to release NINA represented the ultimate boundary she was prepared to cross. The question that haunts this story is, did crossing that boundary cost her everything? While Lisa was preparing for her industry rebellion, something else was happening, a spiritual transformation that would make her final months both profound and deeply unsettling. Her frequent trips to Honduras weren't just humanitarian missions. They were part of a larger quest for inner peace, understanding, and a search for the meaning of life and death itself. Lisa's perspective on death was remarkably spiritual and completely at odds with most people's natural fear of mortality. She viewed death not as an end, but as a natural transformation where energy merely changes form. Rather than feeling dread about death, she accepted it as a new beginning, a belief that would prove eerily prophetic. She once confided to a filmmaker that it wouldn't surprise her if she died young. Think about that for a moment. Here was a 30-year-old woman at the peak of her creative powers, talking casually about her own early death as if it was an inevitability she had already accepted. Those close to her during this period described Lisa as being profoundly introspective, focused on spiritual healing and self-discovery. She often spoke of undergoing a spiritual metamorphosis and felt she was on the verge of a significant awakening, or possibly an ending. In early 2002, Lisa embarked on what would be her final journey to Honduras, bringing along her brother, sister, and several producers for a spiritual retreat. She was working diligently on a documentary exploring the lives of the Garifuna people, an ethnic community with African heritage. This wasn't just a project for her, it was part of her ongoing pursuit of deeper understanding about life, death, and the connections between all living things. But it was during this trip that Lisa began speaking more frequently about feeling followed by an unseen presence, a force that seemed to be both guiding and observing her closely. Those around her noted her increasingly introspective and spiritually reflective nature. Video footage from this period shows moments of serene yet distant stares, with eyes that seemed both vacant and introspective, as if she was already reconciling with what lay ahead. These weren't the ramblings of someone losing touch with reality. Lisa was articulate and thoughtful about these feelings. She spoke of dark energy pursuing her, of spiritual forces at work that others couldn't see or understand. In the documentary, Last Days of Left Eye, she discussed these beliefs with a surprising sense of tranquility, accepting the nearness of her own death with an almost supernatural calm. Looking back at this footage now, knowing what happened next, it's impossible not to feel a chill. Lisa appeared detached, almost as if she was viewing her own life from outside herself, preparing for a transition she somehow knew was coming. On April 10th, 2002, just 2 weeks before her own death, Lisa experienced an event that would shake her to her spiritual core and convince her that unseen forces were closing in. While traveling in Honduras, a country where pedestrians frequently walk alongside roadways due to insufficient infrastructure, her entourage's vehicle was involved in a tragic accident. A 10-year-old boy had stepped off the median while trying to catch up with his siblings. The vehicle, driven by Lisa's personal assistant Stephanie, struck the child. In the chaos that followed, Lisa and her team sprang into action with desperate urgency. They quickly placed the injured boy into their vehicle, where Lisa cradled his bleeding head while another person performed mouth-to-mouth resuscitation during the frantic drive to a nearby hospital. Despite their desperate efforts, the boy succumbed to his injuries the following day. Lisa took full responsibility for the accident, paying approximately $3,700 for the child's medical expenses and funeral costs, plus an additional $925 to help the family with other expenses. Local authorities and the boy's family deemed it a tragic accident, with neither Lisa nor her driver being held legally responsible. But here's where this story takes a supernatural turn that would haunt Lisa's final days. The boy's last name bore a striking resemblance to her own, Baron Fuentes Lopes. They weren't related, but the similarity shook Lisa to her core. She became fixated on the belief that this wasn't a random accident. Instead, she was convinced that a spirit was trailing her and that the boy's death was a cosmic mistake, that the spiritual force pursuing her had taken the wrong person. Lisa was deeply moved by the tragedy, supporting the boy's family emotionally and financially. The boy's mother later expressed gratitude for Lisa's empathy and meticulous attention to their needs during their time of grief. But for Lisa, this wasn't just about making amends for a terrible accident. This felt like a sign, a warning, an omen that couldn't be ignored. She became increasingly certain that a spiritual force was targeting her life, that the accident was a message from beyond that her time was running out. This belief consumed her thoughts in the days that followed, amplifying her existing feelings about being pursued by unseen forces. The fact that she had literally held a dying child named Lopes in her arms, feeling his life slip away while she tried desperately to save him, seemed to confirm all her fears about the dark energy she felt following her. It was as if the universe was showing her a preview of her own fate. Just 15 days later, that fate would catch up with her. April 25th, 2002, dawned like any other day in La Ceiba, Honduras, but it would end as one of the darkest days in music history. Lisa was documenting her spiritual journey, working on her projects, seemingly at peace despite the ominous feelings that had been plaguing her. That afternoon, she got behind the wheel of a rented Mitsubishi Montero with 7 other passengers. They were traveling near a village called Roma when everything changed in an instant. According to witness accounts and the subsequent investigation, Lisa found herself in a deadly game of automotive chess. First, she swerved to avoid an oncoming truck. Then, in a split-second reaction, she swerved again to evade another vehicle. But physics and fate had already taken control. The Montero careened off the road, crashing into 2 trees before rolling over multiple times. The sound of twisting metal and shattering glass filled the air as the vehicle came to rest in a roadside ditch. In the mayhem, 7 passengers were ejected from the vehicle, and somehow, miraculously, all 7 survived. But Lisa wasn't among them. She was found with fatal head trauma, a fractured skull base, and open cerebral wounds that killed her instantly. She was just 30 years old, the same age as the spiritual awakening she had been experiencing, the same age as her rebellion against the music industry, the same age as all the secrets she had been preparing to reveal. Honduran authorities investigated thoroughly, but could not pinpoint the exact cause of the crash. Some theorized mechanical failure, perhaps faulty brakes or steering problems with the rental vehicle. Others concluded it was simply a tragic accident with no hint of foul play, just a series of unfortunate split-second decisions that led to catastrophe. But for those who knew Lisa's story, her spiritual premonitions, her industry rebellion, her feelings of being pursued by dark forces, the timing seemed impossibly coincidental. The news of Lisa's death sent shockwaves through the music world and beyond. For T-Boz and Chile, the loss was devastating. These weren't just bandmates. They were women who had navigated triumph and adversity together for over a decade. Despite occasional tensions within the group, their bond was deep and genuine. In the immediate aftermath, they pledged to honor Lisa's memory, to keep her spirit alive through their work and words. But privately, they were grappling with the same questions that haunted everyone who knew Lisa's story. Why now? Why like this? The timing of Lisa's death raised eyebrows throughout the industry. Here was an artist who had been preparing to expose industry corruption, who had aligned herself with Death Row Records, who had been working on an album called NINA. That would have given her complete creative and financial independence. And that album, NINA, was never officially released. Think about that. Lisa Lopes, one of the most distinctive voices in hip-hop history, creates what she believes will be her masterpiece, an album representing her new identity not applicable, her break from industry control, and it disappears into legal limbo after her death. Fans and industry observers began connecting dots that painted a disturbing picture. Lisa had been too outspoken, too willing to expose the corruption and manipulation that kept artists under control. She had threatened to break free completely and potentially inspire others to do the same. For conspiracy theorists, the car accident in Honduras wasn't random tragedy. It was an opportune conclusion for an artist deemed too volatile and dangerous to the established order. Consider the pattern. Lisa experiences spiritual premonitions about death. She aligns herself with death row records against industry titans. She prepares to release an album that would expose industry corruption. She dies in a remote location under circumstances that, while investigated, leave room for doubt about the complete truth. The haunting parallels between the young boy's death and her own added another layer to the mystery. Both involved car accidents. Both resulted in victims with variations of the Lopes name. Both left Lisa feeling that spiritual forces were at work. Was this all elaborate coincidence? Or was Lisa's intuition about unseen forces pursuing her more accurate than anyone realized? Today, more than 2 decades after Lisa Left Eye Lopes left this world, her story continues to resonate with a power that transcends typical celebrity tragedy. This wasn't just the loss of a talented artist. It was the silencing of a voice that dared to speak truth to power at a time when such courage carried deadly consequences. Lisa's life was a study in contrasts. The vulnerable young woman teaching herself piano in Philadelphia, and the fierce performer setting fire to mansions. The humanitarian working with children in Honduras, and the rebel preparing to expose industry corruption. The spiritual seeker accepting death as transformation, and the fighter refusing to be controlled by anyone. What makes her story so compelling isn't just the mystery surrounding her death, but the fearlessness she displayed in life. From her early days with TLC through her final rebellion, Lisa consistently chose authenticity over safety, truth over comfort. Her influence on music extends far beyond her contributions to TLC's massive success. She showed that artists could be multifaceted: rapper, singer, humanitarian, spiritual seeker, industry critic. She proved that success didn't require surrendering your voice or your values. The questions surrounding her death may never be fully answered. We may never know if her spiritual premonitions were genuine intuition or the result of stress and trauma. We may never know if her death was truly accidental or something more sinister. We may never hear the complete NINA album that represented her final artistic statement. But what we do know is this: Lisa Left Eye Lopes lived on her own terms and died refusing to be silenced. In a world that constantly tries to control artists, to manipulate their voices and exploit their talents, Lisa's story serves as both inspiration and warning. Her legacy lives on in every artist who chooses independence over security, truth over convenience, authenticity over industry approval. Her spirit survives in the music that challenged social norms, addressed important issues, and spoke directly to people's hearts and minds. And perhaps most importantly, her story reminds us that some truths are worth fighting for, even when that fight comes with ultimate consequences. Whether you believe Lisa was the victim of a tragic accident or something more deliberate, her life stands as testimony to the power of an individual voice raised against systems of control and exploitation. She was, in every sense, a revolutionary. And revolutionaries, as history shows us, are always dangerous to those who profit from the status quo. Lisa Left Eye. Lopes' death remains shrouded in questions, but her music, courage, and spiritual search left a lasting mark. Behind the fame was a fierce woman who spoke truth to power, lived boldly, and wrestled with forces many never saw. Her voice was cut short, yet her message about authenticity and fearless expression still reverberates. Curious about the moments that never made the headlines? We uncovered rare interviews, private letters, and a timeline that reframes key events. details that change how you see her life and death. Her influence still colors modern music and activism. Artists cite her fearlessness. Download Scoob app now to get access to the full story. If this episode moved you, follow us on Scoob for bonus commentary, sources, and extended interviews. Thanks for joining this deep dive. Keep questioning, keep listening, and never be afraid to use your voice.